bagian dari ASEAN ini, maka kita melihat soal tadi hubungan masa depan, mobilitas dan yang lain-lain. Maka apa yang dilakukan Indonesia terhadap minoritas ini adalah merupakan satu kemestian untuk menjadikan paradigma tentang mobilitas Islam menjadi bagian yang kita bisa melakukannya dalam konteks global. Okay. So if we look at the picture here, so this is kind of my imagination. I asked my children who are working in IT and they said, what do you want, Dad? No, give me some good picture about that in this kind of episode. You have Westerns in the Gulf, you have Muslim girls working in financial center in Paris, and you have Silicon Valley, you have education city in Doha, which are staffed by many American, many Australian, many British, and so on and so forth. So meaning that not only Mataraman Jawa, and I see what you call it chakro. I cannot find the proper picture of chakro. So in modern term you call it God pose. So that's a picture there. This is modern chakro, which is not actually the one. Jadi yang saya bayangkan chakro yang tradisional itu adalah bangunan yang seperti Arc de Triomphe di Paris, tetapi dalam model yang membuka kesempatan buat berbagai komponen untuk melakukan sesuatu berhubungan secara terbuka. Jadi ini menurut saya ide yang sangat penting. Kemudian sewaktu saya belajar tentang mobile Muslims, bagaimana Islam dibawa melalui Silk Road atau Spice Road, kita menemukan istilah Caravan Sarai, dalam bahasa Inggrisnya menjadi Caravan Serai, jadi tempat pemberhentian para musafir. Kemudian kalau kita ke Eropa kita menemukan Gate City. Kalau Anda yang belajar di Leiden ketemu dengan Gate City di Leiden yang ada Watermolennya itu, ya itu menggambar sebagaimana juga di Paris ada tradisi-tradisi seperti itu. Jadi menurut saya satu hal yang bisa dilakukan oleh kita sebagai citizen of the world, sebagai global citizen, di samping adanya formal organizations, you have United Nations, you have World Bank, you have nation state, and so on and so forth. Jadi kita memiliki, kita dituntut, kita memiliki kesempatan juga untuk berkontribusi terhadap adanya komunikasi yang bersifat global. Exchange between many different parts, tanpa ada paksaan. Kemudian mereka juga dituntut untuk melakukan sesuatu yang bermanfaat. Jadi membuka opportunities dalam bahasanya Kenneth Bush. Apa itu? Suatu nodal point yang menghubungkan berbagai komponen untuk berkontribusi menciptakan, menjaga perdamaian. Jadi ini istilah yang tentunya berbeda dengan building peace, maintaining peace, peacekeeping, dan yang lain-lain. Itu yang tentunya merupakan satu disiplin yang sangat penting dalam konteks peace building, dalam konteks peacekeeping dan yang lain-lain. Jadi yang ada dalam pikiran saya adalah pada prinsipnya agama itu adalah perdamaian, religion is peace, so therefore peace is part and parcel of religion, and therefore we keep them alive, we keep it alive voluntarily. So each part contribute, each nodal point contribute to that kind of maintenance of peace as such. Ya, ini kita sudah terkenal, Indonesia memiliki international peacekeeping missions, dan ini salah satunya saya tunjukkan bagaimana mereka bertugas di Lebanon. Ada mahasiswa saya yang menulis PhD tentang bagaimana peacekeeping dalam konteks Islam. Okay, right. seperti saya katakan bahwasanya dalam konteks Islam kita memiliki what I call it as religious paradigm for mobility. So we know the term used in what you call in hadith, in tabaqat, in siyar, in tarikh, the term like hijrah. But Ibn Khaldun introduced the term, they call it iftaraqa, intashara. Kemudian yang menjadi terkenal adalah ar-rihlah as-safar. Semuanya menggambarkan perpindahan tersebut. Jadi ini berbagai model perubahan in spatial mobility that involve physical movement by the individual as such. Yeah, and the other one, what we call it as social mobility, we call it jam'ul akhbar. So you move from one city to the other in order to collect ahadith, to collect akhbar. Kemudian yang menjadi terkenal, what you call it ar-rihlah, normally related to the idea of tolabul ilmi, belajar. Kemudian yang menjadi sangat populer tentunya adalah al-hajj, kemudian juga al-bai. Ini adalah hal-hal yang tentunya menurut saya paradigma tentang mobilitas dalam Islam, paradigma dalam konteks social mobility ataupun dalam konteks spatial mobility. Kemudian yang lain lagi, so I have to stick to my text. What we call, especially here, is relevant for those who are studying Islamic law. We call it Ihya'ul Amsar wa Ta'miruha. Jadi ini juga mengakibatkan adanya perubahan, menjadi orang kaya, menjadi landlord in many different part of the world. So indeed it is also created problem. For example, As-Sawadi, Al-Dul Sawad di Irak yang menjadi isu antara pengikut dinasti Umayyah dan penduduk Irak pada waktu itu. Tapi kemudian dalam konteks yang lain kita memiliki juga Qudwat, Sahibul Zakah, Sahibul Surtah yang dikirim ke berbagai provinsi dan juga merekrut agen-agen kerajaan, khalifah, kesultanan dan yang lain di berbagai tempat. Kemudian yang lain ada konsep al-mudun, al-husun, al-aswaq, al-masajid, ar-rubut, yaitu ribat, khonqoh, yang semuanya ini adalah menunjukkan adanya mobilitas yang kaitannya adalah erat sekali dengan dalam bahasanya Ibn Khaldun tentunya at-tamaddun dan ada kaitannya dengan bureaucratization. Ya, kemudian juga kita mengenal Islam sampai ke Asia Tenggara bukan karenanya adanya tentara, adanya birokrasi, tapi adanya hubungan al-bai, hubungan perdagangan between Southeast Asia and the Middle East. What I call it as the spice route, or historian call it as spice route as such. Yeah. All right, and then in the modern terms, we also see many Muslims from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Morocco, to mention some, and quite clearly from Southeast Asia, who spend most of their life in Silicon Valley. And Professor Arsmil, in a sense, was born in America. So this is very clear that, so we have that mobility. But mobility also created problem, which I will talk later. Whether Muslim also can good example in accommodating others. The true meaning of cosmopolitanism, being cosmopolitan. You allow your people to be mobile, but you allow space for others to move into your territory, to your nation, to your state as such, or you accommodate others in your own environment as such. Yeah. Okay, and the simple one, here in Southeast Asia, we see that here in Bali, this is a good example of many Indonesians, Bali. International spot. In the next few days, we'll have host the G20 summit. But every day, the Balinese welcome international travelers. Yeah. So in Islamic sense, we see that this morning I go ngaji to Singaraja. Go ngaji to Denpasar. I meet Pak Imam Hidayat, who is also Kiai in Denpasar. So we have that kind of mobility. We go around in the region, we go around in many other parts, including Tarim in Hadramaut. Yeah, okay, so this is reality that what I'm talking about. This is interesting in terms of numbers. So what we see here is that international migrant, as recorded by Migration Report 2020, 3.6% of what populations consists of those international migrants. People who live in countries that they were not born in. Okay, 3.6%. Out of the total population of 7 billion point 8. So, this is quite fractions. But then this number does not include the internal migration, which is triple from that. So like 10, what do you call that? Yeah, so triple, meaning that 10% of the total population, internal migration. And most of them, like some 50% of the internal migrations took place in Asia. So quite a number there. So the point that I want to make here is that what is the conditions of migrant, international Muslim migrant. So the number according to the PEW research centers is not far from 3.6%. So 2010 it was 3.8 and projected by 2030 to be 8% projected, not yet materialized. But remember the crisis of Muslim migrants in Europe during 2015-2016. Many European, many EU countries closed their door, or those who opened the door, then they face major political crisis domestically, like what happened in Germany with Merkel in election in that following year as such. So in a sense then, despite the uproar of migrant crisis or Muslim migrant crisis in Europe 2016, the reality is that their number is not significantly very high. So meaning that it is exaggeration to say the least. Now, so this is the problem that I hope to give some kind of explanations in the next slide. So what we see here is that why more migrants decide to leave their countries and move to new one. So what we see here is that opportunity for Muslims, that Islam should bring bounty, should bring rahmah, not only to their own community, but to the whole universe. The other one, not only pull and push theory in migration, but we see that capital migration eventually also lead to labor migrations. Kenapa pekerja-pekerja memilih bekerja di berbagai tempat yang berbeda dengan kelahiran mereka? Karena international capital also move from one place, not only from New York, not only from Hong Kong, but eventually distributed to many different cities around the world or industrial centers around the world. So eventually then, migration in a sense is not only the will of the people, but the people were forced to opt for job opportunity or job market that those are located outside them. Okay, and then eventually you have incentive of financial return. The other one is that our digital space, one way or the other also encourage young generation especially to take career outside their countries. But of course, on the other side, this also can reduce the idea of moving from their land and stay at home, work from home, because of what I will set the next one. But the constraints of social mobility, the other one is that the critical one is the brain drain. Many countries who send their children, especially the educated one, and especially the cream of their country abroad, normally give reason why they continue to suffer economically. They are categorized as undeveloped because of the brain drain. But there have been a lot of discussion about this assessment about the brain drain. The fact remains that, for example, South Asians are very proud that they make Vice President of America as descendant of South Asian. The recent Prime Minister of UK is also South Asian. The Mayor of London is also South Asian. So this is, in a sense, what we call it, this is brain drain, or in a sense, this is paragon of good for what we call descending countries. Okay, now, the next one, the democratic control. Ini penting untuk saya highlight sedikit bagaimana berkaitan dengan penyusutan pertumbuhan penduduk ini. Ini merupakan satu hal yang tentunya sekarang dialami oleh profesor kita dari Jepang, bagaimana Jepang mengalami kemunduran pertumbuhan penduduk, sehingga ada desa-desa yang kosong. Di Indonesia sudah terjadi, di Bawean sudah semenjak dulu terjadi. Di Malaysia, tempat saudara saya juga banyak di Malaysia, orang muda kebanyakan di KL, yang tua-tua di kampung. Kemudian itu juga mengubah berbagai pola hidup. Tapi ini adalah saya menunjukkan akibat yang bisa dilakukan dengan yang berlaku. Jadi ini diprediksi juga di Cina, bagaimana pertumbuhan ekonomi Cina akan terpengaruh dengan menurunnya penduduk Cina. Jadi pertumbuhan yang 10% dengan merosotkan penduduk juga tidak bisa, sehingga human mobility also become restricted because of the demographic control. Jadi ini adalah sesuatu yang tentunya dalam konteks yang lain lagi. Constraint-nya adalah adanya nation state, negara-negara menutup pintu seperti EU yang menutup pintu kepada migran. So this is what really what you call lack of red herring in the context of mobility. Many countries will normally welcome Muslim migrants and eventually shift their position into closing their door on this bigger problem. The last one is, I said, virtual and online activities in a sense also concerning, because now more and more people, including members of your family, now working from home. Working from home, not only companies or government office in Jakarta, government office in Denpasar, but they're working for financial centers in Tokyo, financial centers in Los Angeles, financial centers in even Monte Carlo. So this is in a sense also limited the physical mobility Now, this is what you call, this is in a sense, I am not talking that this can be materialized and eventually we don't need passport. So therefore, because we are global citizens, we enjoy this. For example, the story of my grandparents in the late 19th century migrate to Malaysia. So you don't have passport because if you have not passport, there are many requirements. You just cross the strait and eventually stay there. Work as migrant in Malaysia. So in a sense, there is no passport, meaning that in a sense, we are simply global citizen. We are citizen of the world. But as we also know, conflict also created by the question of without borders. So eventually, stronger countries expand their territories to other countries, and eventually we need a modern nation state. So we see that modern nation state become also important, and we have to deal with it. So the idea of global citizen perhaps is in a sense is discussive tradition, not in a sense of what you call the formations of by the end of the day rule for global citizen, and eventually we don't need passport and so on and so forth. Okay. In reality, Muslims almost by default required to enlighten oneself by studying. Islam is scriptural religion. As many other scriptural religions, you have to refer to text and you have to study the text. You have to study the teaching as such, professional development, career prospect, refuge, novelty, curiosity to know other places, to know other cultures, to know other people. So these are, in a sense, opening. But on the other hand, mobile Muslim also face many different kinds of stereotyping. They also face what we call it ethnizations of religion, demonization, stigmatization, and so on and so forth. So, for example, this is popular in what you call critical literature. Apakah Muslim yang memakai hijab di Eropa itu merupakan satu kelanjutan dari tradisi masyarakat Afrika Utara, dari Tunisia, dari Algeria, dari Maroko untuk menggunakan hijab, atau itu sebetulnya merupakan satu cara seorang wanita Muslim mengamalkan ajaran. Jadi perdebatannya yang nanti akan kita lihat mengkategorikan Muslim dalam konteks etniknya ini juga merupakan suatu hal yang sering digunakan sebagai cara untuk mendekatkan mereka dengan konsep integrasi diri. Tapi adakah itu merupakan suatu jawaban terhadap Muslim? Tapi sebenarnya ini adalah juga membatasi bagaimana cara-cara hidup yang dipandang sebagai Muslim, apakah itu asalnya dari Indonesia, dari Malaysia, dari Maroko, mereka merasa nyaman. Jadi adalah satu hal yang tentunya adalah sepihak, mengatakan ini adalah sesuatu yang tidak ada kaitannya. Kemudian yang selanjutnya adalah Islamophobia yang sangat populer. We see anti-migration because of nationalists, because of the populist what we call jargon, mottos, and eventually campaigners. Now, the challenge for Muslims is that how can Muslims who become diaspora synthesize their religious, we call it quote-unquote ethnical legacy with the new home in Europe, in North America, in Japan, how they can adjust, how they can synthesize it. So there are many discussions about that. I'll talk later very briefly that Muslims also opt to integrate, maybe not assimilate, to integrate, to join the Verzweeling in Netherlands, to join multiculturalism in UK to become good guest worker in German and now become German.
Mas kapan magtunay hari ini tuh?
Okay. All right, so I repeat again. So this is a picture more clearly that to me, mobility in a sense is part and parcel of our contribution to make peace. To become nodal point of communication, to become nodal point of networks, also express that voluntary joining. Bagaimana usaha untuk menjaga perdamaian, untuk melanjutkan perdamaian yang diwariskan oleh ajaran-ajaran agama ini menjadi suatu kemestian. Jadi kalau peace building dalam konteks United Nations itu adalah sesuatu yang sudah dipelajari, dikaji, kemudian diimplementasikan di lapangan yang tentunya itu penting dalam konteks menghindari konflik yang berkelanjutan, konflik bersenjata walaupun konflik juga masih terus terjadi. Ya, satu hal yang menjadi sangat penting, kunci penting dari konsep peace architecture menurut saya dalam paradigma yang saya sebutkan tadi sebagai pusat perhubungan dari berbagai kelompok, dari berbagai elemen travelers dan lain-lain, itu adalah functionality. Jadi mengakomodasi berbagai kepentingan, mengakomodasi berbagai latar belakang. Jadi itu menjadi sangat penting. Sehingga dalam bahasa populer sewaktu seorang bapak ibu di Mataraman Jawa itu mendidik anaknya, termasuk saya yang dididik bapak ibu saya. Jadi ibaratnya surga atau neraka itu ada grade-nya, ada neraka paling dingin, ada neraka yang paling panas, ada surga yang paling enak, ada. Jadi ibaratnya kalau kamu sembayangnya seperti ini mendapatkan ini. Jadi itu mudah sekali. Sehingga dalam konteks itu tadi yang saya sebut sebagai peace architecture, every contributor and every participant have something to offer, to stay there, to join, to stay tuned dengan berbagai cara mereka. Nah, kemudian yang lain yang tentunya menjadi penting memperhatikan bersifat voluntary, memperhatikan kepentingan-kepentingan yang berbeda-beda yang saya sebut sebagai communication hub for all stakeholders, communities, and customers. So in Indonesian context, it is easier to refer to the idea that I'm talking about. So you have what you call FKUB, Forum Komunikasi Umat Beragama. Kemudian the visions is that peaceful coexistence in religious paradigm. Sangat in religious values, religious paradigms. Kemudian visinya itu ada 9M. Mungkin tidak perlu saya bacakan, sangat bagus sekali. Jadi adanya kepedulian, adanya saling menghormati, penggunaan domir, penggunaan nurani untuk menyebut beberapa saja. Jadi adalah konsep-konsep sehingga menjadikan hubungan berbagai hubungan berbagai bagian network tadi menjadi suatu hal yang bisa dipertahankan, bisa diteruskan, mengakomodasi berbagai kepentingan. Oke. Nah ini seperti apa prakteknya? Saya jadi ingat pemikir yang sangat terkenal karena kontroversi pemikirannya, yaitu Clash of Civilization yang diciptakan atau dipopulerkan oleh Samuel Huntington. Semangat udah senang, dia seorang pemikir yang serius tentunya. Murid-muridnya masih tetap menghormati 20 tahun, 25 tahun setelah itu. Tapi juga menjadi bagian kritik yang sangat serius. Seorang kritikus yang sangat mudah untuk diingat tentunya adalah kritiknya Edward Said. Jadi menurut Said, Huntington ini bukan pakar civilization, bukan pakar culture. How can he generalize civilization into 7 or 8 big civilization that eventually cannot see each other, cannot cooperate as such. Ya, katanya dia, instead of the clash of civilization, he said the clash of ignorance. Jadi itu masalahnya. Civilization, katanya Huntington, adalah sesuatu yang akhirnya menjadi ideologi, menjadi sesuatu yang esensial. Bagi Said, dan saya kira banyak kan sejarawan budaya, sejarawan berkaitan dengan individu, dengan budaya, peradaban, tentunya sangat tahu bahwasanya civilization itu besar karena juga saling berhubungan, exchange. Kalau ada buah manisnya juga dikongsi. Cross fertilization. Juga ada istilah yang kemudian menjadi sangat penting, disebut juga menjadi dalam bahasa Malaysia berkongsi. Ini saling berbagi, dalam bahasa Indonesia saling berbagi. Jadi merupakan satu bagian yang penting dalam konteks civilization. Jadi budaya membesar tentu karena dia belajar dari dirinya dan juga belajar dengan orang lain, sehingga selalu tidak menutup diri. Sedangkan dalam kategori Huntington, peradaban itu akhirnya menjadi ossified dan melihat pada dirinya sendiri. Said menuduh Huntington sebagai policy maker yang ingin membuat temuan baru buat mempertahankan America First. Dalam bahasanya Trump menjadi MAGA, Make America, yang Anda ingat mungkin. Jadi adalah slogan Donald Trump yang sangat terkenal, America First. Ya. Tetapi tentunya bagi orang Amerika itu juga bukan merupakan suatu hal yang menjadi kebencian bagi Amerika. Oke, right. Jadi di sini tentunya yang terpenting dalam konteks dialog of civilization ini adalah bahwasanya masa depan dunia tidak bisa didominasi oleh satu kepentingan. Oleh karena itu, walaupun terjadi peperangan, terjadi perbedaan, maka tugas kita, dan ini adalah argumen utama saya, Islam dan agama yang lain, karena terutama agama global, dituntut untuk selalu memastikan bahwasanya pintu mobilitas dunia terbuka. Ini adalah suatu kemestian. Karena masa depan peradaban adalah juga masa depan yang terbuka. Exchange, cross fertilization, and sharing. Saya meminjam kata-kata Edward Said. Oke. Kemudian akhirnya seperti apa? Ada kajian yang sangat menarik, jadi kalau Anda yang rajin membaca jurnal, ada artikel di Comparative Studies in Society and History 2019. Itu ada artikel yang sangat menarik dalam dialog, mengakomodasi 3 penulis Muslim di Eropa, mengkaji tentang bagaimana masyarakat Muslim di Eropa, terutama di Jerman dan di Turki, mengakomodasi kebijakan government untuk menjadi German citizen, menjadi EU citizen. Oke, jadi singkatnya begini. Sebagaimana tadi sudah saya sebutkan, the challenge is that whether Muslim should distinguish to stick to religion or to stick to ethnicity. In reality, of course, Muslim are born or were born in particular location, in particular country. You were born in Germany, So maybe you go to German school, you sprachen Deutsch. Tetapi pulang ke rumah, Anda masih menikmati ayam taliwang daripada KFC. Jadi merupakan satu hal yang tentunya tidak mudah dibedakan. Jadi bagaimana akhirnya kebijakan negara yang ingin memisahkan Muslim, yang ingin mempertahankan jati diri tersebut bisa dilaksanakan di dalam Muslim. Kenyataannya dalam artikel dan juga dalam buku-buku yang mereka tulis, di Jerman ini terdapat paling tidak ada 3 komunitas yang akhirnya juga ada masjid. Ada masjid Salafi, ada masjid liberal, ada masjid negara. Masjid negara ini maksudnya adalah masjid yang disponsori oleh Diyanet di Turki. Kemudian Wazarah Syu'unud Diniyah Maroko, dan Indonesia di Den Haag ada masjid Indonesia. Jadi corak-corak seperti ini. Jadi salah satu contoh yang diuraikan oleh panjang lebar oleh penulisnya Ezra. Jadi di Jerman, jadi Islam itu sebetulnya di Barat sudah menjadi suatu bagian bagaimana mereka mengakomodasi, sebagaimana juga Muslim yang lahir di Indonesia, yang di Indonesia juga sudah berbiasa hidup dalam konteks Muslim dan sekaligus sebagai Indonesia. Ya, ini Prof. Manur, sahabat saya dari Malaysia, kemarin baru berkunjung ke Singaraja, mendapati bagaimana masyarakat Muslim di Bali hidup sebagai orang Bali dan menjadi Muslim. Ya, itu adalah salah satu contoh. Tadi malam saya mendengarkan book review, walaupun saya tidak ketemu akhirnya dengan book review tersebut, saya salah masuk di Padang 4, ternyata di Balangan 4 atau Balangan 4 yaitu Wali Pitu. Ini adalah satu contoh ya, di Jawa ada Wali Songo. Salah satu contoh bagaimana akhirnya Muslim itu bisa hidup secara nyaman dalam 2 kaki tersebut. Jadi adalah tantangan yang menjadikan bagaimana konsep European integration. Anda di Jerman menjadi orang Jerman dan Muslim. Nah ini yang belum ketemu. Anehnya di Inggris, inilah kajian yang menarik, ada mahasiswa saya yang menulis doktorat berkaitan dengan sebelum selesai, berkaitan dengan bagaimana syariah di Inggris bisa dilakukan. Inggris sudah terkenal, saya lama di Brunei, mengkaji tentang Mohammedan Law, jadi di Malaya sudah terjadi semenjak abad ke-19. Inggris memperkenalkan positive law dengan Mohammedan Law tersebut. Ada 12 poin bagaimana Islamic law. Tapi di Inggris sendiri sampai hari ini belum ditemukan resep supaya Muslim ini paling tidak punya Mohammedan law. Walaupun sudah ada Muslim Council di British. Jadi ini adalah masih menjadi masalah. Jadi ada hal yang tentunya tidak mudah. Jadi kita kembali lagi. Akhirnya saya akhiri. So my closing is that I repeat what I started this talk. Mobility is the future. Muslim has the future if the world maintain open, universal mobility. And Muslim must contribute, Muslim must propagate, Muslim must insist that they are cosmopolitan. They can live with others, they can accommodate others. I think I have enough. I still might stay longer here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Prof. Yes, global Muslim mobility and peace architecture and religious cooperation and mobility is the future. Nah, jadi sangat jelas sekali saya kira, dan tidak mempanjang lagi, kita akan undang speaker yang kedua. Dr. Azmil, saya akan bacakan dulu sedikit brief bio ya untuk Profesor Azmil ini. Azmil Taib itu nama beliau, lahir di Amerika ya, orang Malaysia dan keturunan Sunda. D3. Seperempat Sunda. Senior lecturer at the School of Social Science, University Science Malaysia, Penang. Ya, kalau orang Penang sudah hafal. He has done extensive research on political Islam, social movements, and local government politics, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia. He received his PhD from the Australian National University, ANU. Ya. Previously he was a Fulbright Fellow, Fulbright Scholar. Ini di sini Prof. Abdul Masud nih, our colleague, beliau senior Fulbright Scholar. Ya, Prof. Ruslan juga ya. Kemudian adjunct professor at Universitas Negeri Malang, ya pernah di Malang ya. Kemudian penulis buku Islamic Education in Indonesia and Malaysia, Shaping Mind, Shaping Souls, yang diterbitkan oleh Routledge di 2018. Kemudian ada buku yang tadi menang ya, won the Colleagues' Choice Award from Social Science at 2019 International Convention of Asia Scholars ya, in Leiden, Belanda. Kemudian he also the editor of forthcoming book of from Routledge. Judulnya Education and Power in Contemporary Southeast Asia. Nah ini kita akan baca bukunya sekejap lagi ya. Kemudian he is also the editorial board member of the journal Kajian Malaysia, published by University Science Malaysia, Muslim Education Review, published by Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, UII ya. Kemudian Tarbiyah, Journal of Education Muslim Society, published by Universitas Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah, tempatnya Prof. II menjadi guru besar. Dan kita please welcome Profesor Azril Taib. So time is yours. Tepuk tangan yang gemuruh.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a good morning to everyone. I hear very enthusiastic voice from the audience, so I hope you can keep up with me throughout my talk today. First of all, thank you to the organizing committee, the panitia, especially my Bung Rafiq is not here, for inviting me to Aicis in Bali this year. I'm truly honored to be here. And also thank you everyone, the students from Stein Denpasar, for coming to this event as well. So before I start I'd like to start off my presentation today with maybe a few numbers from Malaysia. Right? So recently, a few months ago, I think it was in May 2022, so there was a survey findings announced. So the surveys were done by Merdeka Center, which is a very well-known polling organization, survey organization in Malaysia, and also Sisters in Islam, looking at Muslim youth in Malaysia. So their thoughts, what their ideology, their political leanings, yeah, what they think about the economy, what they think about religion. So various aspects, right, of the Malaysian Muslim youth in Malaysia. So, so these are some of the surprising numbers that came out from that survey, right? So 65% of Muslim youth in Malaysia believe that Malaysians or Malays or Muslims should only vote for Muslim leaders in Malaysia. even though we know Malaysia is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, right? 82% of Muslim youth want the Quran to replace the constitution. Yeah? 82% also want to revive the Islamic Caliphate, Khilafah Islam. And 75% want the country to implement the Hudud law. Yeah? So these are quite, I guess, shocking numbers, right? So it is, it is part of this conservative trend that we can see that is so pervasive in the Malaysian society these days, right? And then you can see this with the young generation in Malaysia. So today, my talk will be about how these ideas are introduced, implemented, and spread in the society. So the theme of this session is mobility, right? Muslim mobility. But instead of talking about mobility of people, of human beings, as Pak Iik already presented well presented just now. So I'm talking more on the mobility of ideas. Yeah. So I intend to look at the mobility of ideas, transnational, both transnational and national, with a special focus on two Islamist groups in Malaysia. So one is called Ikram, and the other one is ISMA, right? So those two Islamists, same but different, yeah? So they can be same in many ways, they can also very different in many ways as well, yeah? So this presentation is actually a small part of a larger research project that me and my colleagues are doing in Malaysia, looking at how these Islamist groups and their ideas influence and shape public discourse in Malaysia, shape the society through social media, online, offline, the various groups that are involved, this network of groups, organizations. So it's part of the larger project. So today, the focus is just on the mapping, yes, of how these ideas travel. Yeah? So not simply from this organization, but you can see through this network of groups, yeah, and people as well, how it's spread in the society, either consciously or unconsciously, right? So why is it important to map the mobility of Islamist ideas, right? So Islamist ideas manifest themselves in variety of avenues, right? Ruang, yeah? So through numerous vehicles, yeah? Wadah, yeah? Such as NGOs, yeah? Non-government organizations, health facilities, pop culture, K-pop. I know many of you maybe are fans of K-pop, K-drama. These are some of the avenues, right? So media, right? Either online and offline, books, yeah. So and many others, right? So the mapping is just as a way to keep track of how these ideas travel in the society, right? So, especially when many of these ideas appear in places where they are least expected, right? So, you can find these ideas in discourse on liberal democracy, for example, or human rights, or decolonization. So it's not simply about, at least, these ideas try to engage with those who were before seen as unengageable, you know, talking on two different wavelengths, so to speak. Yeah? So, for example, you have Islamist group that use the language of democracy and human rights and decolonization as a way to further their agenda, right? As a way to spread their agenda. So basically shaping the language that human rights, democracy, and decolonization that once the known only among the leftist circle, among those on that side, right, of the ideological spectrum. So now they're engaging with that using similar language, but of course with different objective, right? So this is the kind of sophistication that we can see when we map, how these ideas travel. Yeah. So, and also another reason is for Islamist group like ISMA, for example, which has a bad reputation in Malaysia. I guess bad for meaning that unsavory reputation, I should say, known for its the racist remarks made by its leaders, right? Even it's an ethno-religious group, yeah. So by having different vehicles, different ways of engaging the public, the society, so it can somehow overcome this reputation, so people don't know, like, oh, they're not ISMA, they're someone else, yeah. So there is a certain type of surreptitious, I guess, halus, yeah, maybe I would say. So a bit sneaky, yeah. So when it's like using proxies, yeah, proxy organizations and things like that. And also, finally, the objective of this presentation is also to compare these two Islamist organizations, right, IKRAM and ISMA, two organizations that share similar origin, right? So they come from, I guess, from the same mothers, I guess, so to speak, but they broke up, yeah? And then it can be, so they can be very same, but at the same time, they can be very different too. So as I will make clear later on in my presentation. So here, maybe, if you're curious, where is it, now it disappeared. Can we get back to the first one? Nanti yang controlnya dari sana atau di sana ya? Boleh ke slide yang pertama? Oh yeah. So here, if you're wondering what the protest is about, so this is the protest that took place in 2019. So it's a protest against Aicis. So this is International Convention for the Eradication of all forms of racial discrimination. Yeah? So it's a UN, United Nations Convention that Malaysia has yet to ratify. So there was an attempt to ratify this convention, and then which ended up with tens of thousands of people protesting on the streets of Kuala Lumpur in 2019. So, which were mobilized by some of these Islamist groups, yeah, especially ISMA. So, So this is just a picture you can see from the protests. So, seterusnya, okay. So as I mentioned, so the focus of today's presentation is on mobility of ideas, of how ideas move, right? So first we look at the transnational movement of ideas, and then we go on to the national movement of ideas, mobility of ideas, and then the focus will be on the national movement of ideas in Malaysia. And you can see similar trend in Indonesia as well, because my research group also looks at this network, the mapping of Islamism in Indonesia, but the focus today will be on Malaysia. So maybe we can talk more about the Indonesian during the Q&A, which I don't mind engaging as well. So the first is the external mobility, transnational movement of ideas. So in general, you have these three Islamist groups, right? That you can find, you can see in Malaysia now. So the focus will be on the first one, right? So ABIM, which is Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia, IKRAM, and ISMA, right? So these are organizations that are inspired by the ideas, even the modus operandi of Ikhwanul Muslimin or Muslim Brotherhood, right? So many of them, they studied overseas, yeah? In the UK, in the US, in Australia. They were influenced by ideas from Muslim Brotherhood, from Ikhwan, yeah? Maybe in mosques that are controlled by Ikhwan members, for example, yeah, in the UK. And second, you have Hizbut Tahrir Malaysia, or maybe here you call HTI, right? Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia. As we know, had been banned by the president, right, along with FPI here. Right? But in Malaysia, Hizbut Tahrir still operate legally, yeah? Even though they're maybe not as active as their counterpart in Indonesia, right? And then we have the Salafism and Wahhabism, or what I like to call Gang Mazhar. So Mazhar is the mufti in a small state in Malaysia called Perlis, by the northern border with Thailand. So one of the few Salafist preacher, muftis, ulama in Malaysia, in a country where Islam is dominated by Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Aswaja. Yeah? So there is also competition and conflict between the two in Malaysia as well, but there will be outside of the scope of this presentation today, but maybe we can discuss about that during the Q&A as well. Okay, so the three, the first one, right? So the three Islamist organizations, and the two that I'll be focusing on today. So first is ABIM. ABIM is the first one that came on the scene in the 1970s, established by the former Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, right? So it was part of the Islamic resurgent wave that swept across the world, especially in Malaysia in the late 1970s onwards, right? So ABIM, Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia, yeah? So Malaysian youth movement, right? Muslim youth movement. So in a nutshell, so ABIM, its orientation is more outward looking. So it looks at global ummah. So Muslims, Malays being part of this global Muslim community, right? So the outward, the orientation has always been outward. It's more cosmopolitan, as Prof. Iik has eloquently mentioned just now in his lecture, and also more inclusive, right? Meaning that it engages with non-Muslims, is open to, say, interfaith dialogues, is open to working with non-Muslims on various issues, common issues, like corruption, for example, or electoral reforms and things like that, right? And then the second one, you have Ikram. So Ikram, or the former name is JIM, or Jemaah Islah Malaysia, right? So JIM and ABIM, they're almost similar in so many ways, yeah? So as you can see, it's outward oriented as well. So the focus is more on global ummah, Muslim ummah. It's cosmopolitan, right? And also inclusive. So in many ways, they operate the same way as ABIM, yeah? And finally, you have ISMA. So as I've mentioned before, ISMA came from Ikram as well, but they broke away because of differences in ideology, in orientation. So as you can see here, ISMA is more inward oriented, right? So the focus is more on being nationalistic, right? Or specifically more ethno-religious. So the focus is more on Malay rights as well as Islamic or Muslim rights in Malaysia, right? So there's the ethnic element to ISMA that you don't find in ABIM or Ikram, right? So in a way that makes it exclusive, right? So because the orientation is limited, right, to only Malays, not just Muslims, but Malays as well, right? So this is in a nutshell, you can see, when you compare these three organizations together, especially Ikram and ISMA, right? So, and all three of them are inspired by Muslim Brotherhood, by Ikhwanul Muslimin, yeah? So, and they basically have the same constituency as well, right? So the same base of members, of supporters, Muslim middle class, upper middle class professionals, yeah? So in a way, they're different than, let's say, PAS. So PAS is an Islamic political party in Malaysia that has roots in the rural area, the Malay heartlands, for example. So different base of supporters, different constituency compared to these three organizations. So the second one, I guess, Hizbut Tahrir. So as I mentioned before, it is legal in Malaysia, unlike in Indonesia, which is banned. But of course, banning an organization doesn't mean that it stops to exist, right? So it just moves underground. So as you see here in Malaysia and in Indonesia, but in Malaysia it's still active. Yeah, so they have their muktamar, their congress every year. So they operate openly, and their network in Malaysia is not as extensive as you can find here in Indonesia. It's not like HTI here, right? So not as active. It doesn't have a figure like Felix Yao, for example, like here, a well-known HTI affiliate that helped to popularize HTI ideas through pop culture here. Yeah, programs like Yuk Mengaji and things like that, using K-pop, using all this pop culture basically to popularize ideas that might not be popular to begin with, right? And then finally you have the Salafis, right, or the Wahhabis. These are the well-known ones in Malaysia. So they're the minority. As I mentioned, Malaysia is predominantly Aswaja, right? So Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah. But they're there, and they have positions, strategic positions in the Malaysian government, in the religious authorities in Malaysia. So the first one is Mazhar, of course. Muhammad Asri Zainul Abidin. So so it's an acronym of his name, right? So it's a well-known mufti from the small state of Perlis in the north, by the Thai border. And then you have some of the Zakir Naik, yeah? So Dr. Zakir Naik, who is now a political refugee in Malaysia, right? So being granted political asylum by the Malaysian government. So he's living in Malaysia right now under the protection of the Malaysian government. And then you have the guy next to him is Firdaus Wong as well. So a Muslim convert, a mu'alaf also. But not the Indian guy here. Eh? So the Indian guy here is a deputy chief minister of Penang, who's often the target of these Salafis. So yeah, so P. Ramasamy, so this guy, so he's often the critic of this group, and then he later on also becomes the target of this group. So their favorite, I guess, yeah, punching bag, so to speak. Yeah. And then you have Ustad Rozaimi Ramli, so who also works for the Malaysian government. And then you have another convert here, Indian convert, Mu'alaf, also a preacher. Zamri Vinod, his name. So these are the group. But of course, like I said, the focus of this presentation today is on those two groups that I mentioned earlier, yeah? Ikram and Isma. So just a I guess a general overview of this mapping, so you can see how these ideas, how these organizations operate, right? So there's different avenues that you can find. So it's not just the organization itself, but you can see how these organizations, they have this network, right? They have presence in these different avenues or different vehicles they use to help to disseminate their ideas within the society at large, right? So you can see here there are business networks, hospitals, Muslim fashions, restaurants, and other types of businesses, right? Media, of course, book publication and things like that. TV station, radio station, political parties, yeah, so past the one that I mentioned, but they also have presence in other political parties as well. And also NGOs, yeah. So this is the focus of the presentation today. Education, universities, schools, especially. So I will talk a bit more about schools, yeah, because you have the same phenomenon here in Indonesia as well. Because you have SIT, right, Sekolah Islam Terpadu here, right? Or maybe some of you know as Sekolah PKS, right? So we have SIT in Malaysia as well. And there is connection, partnership, yeah, between the SIT in Indonesia and also SIT in Malaysia as well. They are part of the same phenomenon and the same modus operandi, as I will go a bit in depth later on. So, and then also you have the preachers, the muftis, and you have the bureaucracy, right? So JAKIM, which is part of the central government, Jabatan Kemajuan Islam Malaysia. And then you have the state religious authorities, you have the Sharia court, Sharia law. So, and also finally you have the mosque, Surah, which is Musola in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and also Usra, yeah. So which is also learning circle, halaqah, and all these things, right? So these are some of the main avenues that you can find how these ideas are being spread and disseminated in the society. So first we go to Ikram, right? So this is a simple diagram that basically explains um, their vision, as you know, what they want to achieve in Malaysia, right? So you can see at the bottom there, at the base, you see rejuvenasi jemaah, right? So the focus first is on the character of its members, right? So this is done through usra, halaqah, right? Through this means of, I should say, indoctrination, right? So there are learning modules. So you need to strengthen your members first, right? Before you can go out to the society and help to disseminate your ideas. So the focus is first on itself, then you go out, right? So you have that at the base. Yeah, and then of course, it's time to disseminate your ideas, right? So it means that through these different networks, yeah, through education, through schools, and through occupying strategic positions in private sector and public sector. So you can see here, memanfaat dan melestari perubahan siasah negara, right? So to change the politics using the political system to help advance their agenda, right? So, and also lonjakan institusi, so you can see occupying strategic positions, right, in public and private sector. And then finally, once everything is in place, then you can start to push, right, for the objective, which is to Islamize the society in Malaysia, right? So you can see here, memacu pembinaan negara rahmah. So what does it mean by negara rahmah? We will go in the next slide after this, right? So the Malaysia in the vision of Ikram, which you can see, I would contrast that to how ISMA envisioned what Malaysia should be, right? So these two very contrasting, very different visions of Malaysia by these two organizations, right? But if you look at this, right, it's very similar to what PKS is doing in Indonesia, you know, or what maybe Jemaah Tarbiyah is doing here in the predecessor of PKS, right? Because I've seen the PKS handbook as well. You know, they have similar diagram like this. They have this 5 stages, right? What they want to achieve, like every stage. So Ikram, Abim, they work closely with PKS as well. There used to be a lot of collaboration between these two countries. So when you talk about mobility, and this is the kind of mobility that has been happening for quite some time. You know, so they inspired each other. You know, Anis Mata used to come to Malaysia all the time to give talks. You know, the former president of PKS, right? So now what, Partai, what is it, Bahtera or whatever they call? Huh? Oh, Pelita, yes. So I know so many. Right? So, but used to be, you know, like even until today. So they have the same, you know, the same kind of this diagram, you know, that PKS has. Now you can see with Ikram, right? So this is what Ikram means by Negara Rahmah. So you can see it's inclusive, right? So there's no mention of ethnic identity, for example, like Malaysia should be ruled by Malays, for example. So you don't see, it doesn't appear anywhere here, right? So you can see it's very inclusive in a lot of ways. So kepimpinan negara yang kompeten dan berintegriti, ya. Sistem pemerintahan yang berasaskan semak dan imbang yang berkesan, so tadbir urus yang baik, good governance, right? Undang-undang yang adil, just laws, ya. Masyarakat yang berilmu, berakhlak dan penyayang, so institusi keluarga yang utuh, hubungan etnik dan penganut agama yang harmoni, ya, ekonomi yang mampan, agihan kekayaan yang saksama, ya, pembangunan yang lestari, kebajikan, kesihatan dan keselamatan rakyat yang terpelihara, dan terakhir menerajui usaha keamanan dan kesejahteraan sejagat. Yeah? So there is this idea of universalism, idea of inclusivity, that's embodied in this vision of what Malaysia should be, this negara rahmah, right? So rahmatan lil alamin. Yeah. So this is how Ikram sees, Malaysia, right? So as I mentioned earlier, so the focus is more outward, more on global ummah, more inclusive in that sense. So as far as its network, so you can see the kind of engagement or presence of Ikram. You can see in these various institutions here, women, family, sports and hobbies, education, of course, professional groups, dakwah groups. I cannot even see the slides. So kemanusiaan, humanity, and kebajikan, welfare, right? So youth, orang muda, right? Like you in the audience right now. So you can see the presence here and also their collaboration with various coalitions in Malaysia, GBM, Rasuah Busters, IPPN, all these things, right? So they engage with the society at large. They have presence in various organizations, various institutions. Yeah. So these are some of their networks as well. So as a way to advance the agenda, as well as engaging with the community, with the society at large. So, and this is the network of school of Ikram. So it's called Musleh. So this is what I mentioned earlier. So network, a nationwide network of integrated Islamic school, similar to Sekolah Islam Terpadu (SIT) that you find here in Indonesia, right? So the same, the same curriculum, which is combining Islamic values with general education, right? So what they see before, like if you go to a regular school, like Sekolah Negeri, for example, there's a separation between religious subjects and general subjects, right? So, but if you go to Sekolah Islam Terpadu, SIT, they believe in combining the two. So you still find Islamic values when you learn science, for example, or math, or physics, and biology and things like that, right? So there's no separation between the two. So it's part of this Islamization of knowledge, right? Which is also part of the kind of the work that the agenda of these Islamic organizations too. So this is what the ideas being put to practice in these schools and their curriculum. And then we go to ISMA. So like I said, it begins within Ikram, right? But then it broke away because of ideological differences. ISMA believes in the superiority of the ethnic Malay in Malaysia and also Islam over other groups. So in Ketuanan Melayu, for example, and Ketuanan Islam in Malaysia, so which is different from ABIM and Ikram, which is more universal and more inclusive in that sense. So these are the major difference between these organizations, and you can see here the okay. So you can see here, so you can contrast this to what you see from Ikram before, right? So menolak seruan yang mengatakan Malaysia negara sekular. So the focus you can see here on Islam and Malay, right? Which you don't see that appear in the Ikram's vision of what Malaysia is, right? So there's no mention of Malay, or it's more, it tries to be as inclusive as possible. But here you can see, everything is Islam Melayu, Islam Melayu, Islam Melayu. So this is a major difference, right, between these two organizations. And it was also involved in a lot of these campaigns, primarily the Buy Muslim First campaign, BMF, so which is a hugely popular, it's a big movement in Malaysia. One of the, I guess the prime movers, right? The group that mobilized this movement is Ikram is ISMA, right? So Buy Muslim First. Yeah, so basically, trying to get Muslims to buy only Muslim-produced products or Muslim-owned products. So not just to buy halal products, but also halal products made by Muslims, for example. So even if the halal product made by non-Muslim, that should be avoided, right? And also there's a campaign to, especially now in Malaysia, we will have our election on the 19th of November, so in about 2 weeks' time. So there's also a campaign to vote Muslim first, right? So to choose Muslim leaders over non-Muslim leaders. So there is this campaign. So like I see, the emphasis is on ethnic and religion, right? So exclusive in a sense that, especially when you compare to the other two organizations. So you can see this, some of the protests that took place, right? Himpunan Kebangkitan Ummah. I guess it's almost like what you see in the Aksi 212, right? In Indonesia in 2017, right? So the anti-Ahok protests. So there are also parallel around the same time. So there's also this protests going on, demonstration and gathering, rallies to defend Islam, especially after Malaysia had its first change of government in more than 60 years in 2018. So you can see more and more of this kind of protests, this ethno-religious inspired protests that took place after the 2018 election. Yeah? So because suddenly the government has more non-Muslims, for example, more multi-ethnic, multi-religious. So there were this mobilization. I guess the same that you see when Ahok became the governor of Jakarta. So there's this movement against Ahok as well, right? So mempertahankan Islam, for example, right? So we see similar narrative as well in Malaysia, especially after the 2018 election. And also these are some of the ways as well, as I've said, it's not simply in the political arena, but also they do it in culture as well, pop culture. So they have studios that produce albums like this, and also books. So they have a book publication company as well. The Tarbiyah Sentap, which is also part of the of ISMA, and also even studio to produce movies, right? So the most, I guess the popular one is the recent movie called Mat Kilau, which is also screened in Indonesia a few months ago, right? Because you have Indonesian actor in this movie. What's the guy name? Cecep something. What is his name? The action movie star, right? So he also, but he played a bad guy in this movie, right? So this movie was quite controversial when it came out because the way that it portrays non-Muslims, Chinese, the Sikh, Punjabi people, and also, of course, the British colonial officers. Yeah, so this movie is about this guy, Mat Kilau, who was fighting against the British colonial administration back in the late 1800s. Yeah. So it's a romanticized version of the struggle. So, but it was controversial because the way that it portrayed, Chinese as being greedy and treacherous, the Punjabi soldiers being murderous, of course, like so it was very polarizing, to say the least, right? Because many people loved the movie. It became the highest grossing film in Malaysian history. So more than 90 million ringgit, I think, in like 3 months. But also at the same time, it offended a lot of non-Muslims and also Muslims who don't agree with the way that the narrative that the movie tries to show, tries to project. So I wrote an article, a short article actually, about this movie, about basically how the Islamism tried to sneak into popular culture, especially the movie. Yeah, but the backlash was actually very, very harsh. Yeah, so the one day after the article was published, and there was a very concerted attack, by Isma people. I mean, not to me actually. Surprisingly, I didn't receive that. Maybe because I'm a Muslim, a Malay Muslim. So, but the place where I published this at Fulcrum, which I'm also, by the way, a fellow at Aicis in Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. So Fulcrum is one of the, like where they publish their commentary articles. So I published this after I watched, I forced myself to watch Mat Kilau in the movie theater. So I published this, and then so a day after, it was, I think the internet broke, the social media broke. So it was like constant attack, and then because Aicis was part of the Singaporean government, right? So they got a bit, I guess maybe overly cautious. They get a bit nervous, I would say. So decided to pull the article, yeah, because Isma threatened Aicis with lawsuit and things like that, defamation suit, which I find quite ridiculous because, I mean, they're in Singapore, right? So, I mean, what do you have to worry about? I mean, unless if it's me, because I live in Malaysia, so maybe I should be worried more, but I wasn't worried. But my Singaporean counterparts, they're a bit more conservative, I guess. So being Singaporeans, so they decided to pull the article after one day. But I guess there's always a silver lining, right? So even after one day, the article got the most visits in the history of Fulcrum. Only after one day. So I was like, so I told them, it's like, okay, you want people to visit your website, then you should publish more of this controversial article, so then people will come. So if you publish like boring articles, people don't read, So I mean, people come for whatever reasons, because they don't like the article, but they still visit the website to read the article, right? So you still get the number of visits, So so I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? So you have to take the goods and the bads. So this is what happened in September, so a couple of months ago. So these are also some of the things they do. So they have a think tank called Aicis Institute. So they publish books and they organize forums, seminars on decolonization, on Malays and Islam, place in Malaysia. So this is one example, one book. You can see here, Pembandaran Kolonial. Bandar is kota, yeah? So I guess perkotaan kolonial dan penghapusan bangsa Melayu di Malaysia, how basically how the British colonial administration planned the urban areas in Malaysia, and then in a way that I guess eliminate the Malay community that used to live in these urban areas, and replace them with migrant Chinese, especially who are traders, laborers imported from China back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And also, they launched this report called the Islamophobia report, which is actually kind of ironic, right? If you ask me, because as a Muslim majority living in Malaysia and holding all the important positions of power in the government, in private sector, and still claiming that there's an Islamophobia in Malaysia, right? That is under threat. I remember when from yesterday's keynote speech, when talk about Wertheim's description of Muslim in Indonesia, right? So it's a majority with a minority complex. Pak Mujibur Rahman, right, yesterday. Yes, Pak Mujibur Rahman said that, quoting from Wertheim, saying that Indonesian Muslim is a majority with minority complex. In other words, there's always this feeling of being threatened, right? Even though you're the majority here, right? 88%, 87% of Indonesian population are Muslim, right? But for some reason, for certain groups of people, there's always this feeling that you're being threatened or feeling under siege or attacked by other groups, even though Muslims hold all the important positions of power in this country. So the same like in Malaysia as well, So, for ISMA, for example, seeing that Muslim is constantly under threat, even though, the Prime Minister is Muslim, for example, right? The sultans and everyone, all the people at the top, they're all Muslims, but still, for some reason, they're still feeling insecure and threatened, right? So they published this, and then because they want to submit this report to the United Nations, to the the review. I forget so claiming that there are discrimination against Muslims in Malaysia, right? So which I know I find it a bit ironic, I guess, or maybe even hilarious. Depends on how you see it. So this report came out, right? Basically, what it does is that because I bought a copy of this report because I'm curious to see what kind of Islamophobia incidents that they claim to have taken place in Malaysia. It's basically mostly criticisms of Islam, right? Yes, there are some that can be considered as insults, but there are also legitimate criticism on how Islam may be being, somehow some people practice Islam in Malaysia that can be seen as discriminative or abusing Islam for their own interests and things like that. So these are legitimate criticism, but considered as Islamophobia. So all lumped together in this one broad category of Islamophobia. So, and also it does a lot of, it is very actively engaging students, high school students and overseas students. So ISMA, IKRAM, they have active chapters in countries where there are a lot of Malaysian students. So Australia, United Kingdom, US, and they actively recruit. So these students who will come back to Malaysia and assume important positions in the society, right? Either in the private sector or the public sector. So these are important assets for them, right? If they can recruit these people, from young, basically, right? So they're very active, especially ISMA. You can see here all the kind of programs they do, you know. I mean, it's nothing to do with Islamic agenda at all, right? So they talk about employment, how to write resumes, how to present yourself at job interviews and things like that, right? But it's a way to, I guess, to engage, to get their hook in, right? And then they reel you in closer, right? So this is what they do as well. I mean, I'm saying that Ikram also does this as well, so not just ISMA, right? And this is some of the network of ISMA. So you can see they have a lot of presence here. Some of the groups, children and family, Wafiq here, you know, Maksa, which is a coalition with various other Muslim and Malay NGOs, non-government organizations in Malaysia. Centra down there, if you can see, it's a human rights and democracy organization. They become more sophisticated, right? So these Islamists, how they engage with the society at large, and how, you know, so they know now that in order to engage with the people who are different than them, especially non-Muslims, or maybe liberal Malays, for example, urban elites, so you need to speak their language as well. So the language of human rights, democracy, decolonization. So the discourse, the narrative has been much more sophisticated now, right? So even a lot of non-Muslims or like Malay elites, for example, who engage with them, they didn't even know that they're ISMA, right? Say, oh, they seem nice. They speak the same language. They talk about democracy. They talk about human rights. Yeah. So this is something that a lot of people are unaware of. Yeah. So now we compare this. Now we come to the final part of the presentation. So comparing these two organizations side by side, right? So because like I said, they have a lot of similarities. You know, they come from the same womb, the same mother, right? So like two twins separated at birth, and then the two became two different people. So I guess it would be another way of looking at it. So one, they have hospitals, they have network of health facilities. So ISMA has the Zahran Hospital, you know, the clinics, and then the Ikram has Anur. So they have the network of health facilities, and they have their publication group as well, book publication, media publication. So you have on the left, yeah, you have the Combo Sentap, you know, which is part of the Tarbiyah Sentap I mentioned earlier, right? So you can see all these books, you can find them at Shopee or Lazada, right? So, and then Ikram has Iman, also published their own works, their books and things like that, their writers. And then you have the NGOs as well that work on the Palestinian issue. So you have ISMA has the Aman Palestine, and then Ikram has My Care. So both work in the same area, which is, you know, channeling aid to Palestine, right, especially to Gaza. But these two different organizations by Ikram and ISMA. And then you can see the idea of Rahmatan lil Alamin, you know, so which is advocated by Ikram, and then of course countered by ISMA, saying that Rahmatan lil Alamin dalam kerangka liberal, you know, liberal in this pejorative has a negative connotation, right? So it's a Western invention, so it's not indigenous. Yeah, so this is the how they counter each other, right? And this is what I mentioned earlier, right? So the vision of what they want Malaysia to be, right? So Negara Rahmah for Ikram on the left, and then for Isma on the right, right? So two very stark, different, very contrasting, between these visions, of Malaysia by these two organizations. And then my final slide. So what does it mean, right? So this whole thing, this mapping that I just laid out to you, right, in this presentation. So what exactly? So what is this means in this larger picture, right? So it's a means to an end, basically, right? So this is a way to disseminate your ideas in the society at large, especially with the aim of Islamizing the society. It's not something that you can achieve on the short term. It's not something that you can do in 1 week or 1 month, not even 1 year or 10 years. You need to be able to have a long view, right? This is playing the long game, so to speak, right? So something that you look at, in 50 years. So this is what we want to achieve in Malaysia, right? We want everyone to become Muslim in Malaysia in 50 years. Or even if it takes 100 years, it's okay, right? Because it's a long game. It's a long view. So we're not looking for a short-term gain. So to disseminate and socialize ideology across the society and the government, right? So penetrating, infiltrating into government, private sector, into the government, private sector, right? Educational institutions and things like that, right? I mean, you see similar things happening in Indonesia as well, right? Yeah, because I remember there was a Tempo investigation like a while back, I think like a few months ago, about how JI people now infiltrating into the government, right? And then, of course, I mean, nobody is aware because they don't wear your typical Islamists. They don't, they're like, what's it called, this jangkreng or whatever yeah, so things like that, right? So you see here in Indonesia as well, you see that in Malaysia, right? So, and they employ top-down and bottom-up approach, right? So from the government, from the position of power, but also from the grassroots, right? Through these organizations, from the bottoms up and also from the top. So with the end goal to Islamize society. So no matter how long it takes. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation today. I look forward to the Q&A sessions after this. So thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Tepuk tangan meriah ya. Terima kasih Profesor Azmil dan Profesor Iman Nur. Tidak terasa kita sudah 2 jam. Ya, alhamdulillah. Jadi 1 jam. Sekarang 10:45. Ya, kita mulai tadi 10:45. Dan sangat menarik ya Muslim Mobility hari ini kita dapat memang betul-betul keynote. Ya, 2 keynote speeches. Yang pertama tentang Prof. menyampaikan bagaimana mobilitas ya dari segi fisikal bahkan sampai transnasional dan seterusnya. Dan Profesor Azmil mobilitas idea, gagasan, bahkan ideologi. Ini menarik sekali dan kita mendengar semuanya bahwa ternyata mobilitas itu sangat berdampak pada banyak aspek. Dan tadi Prof. II menekankan bahwa mobilitas itu masa depan, ya, mobility is future. Dan itu bisa membawa perdamaian dan seharusnya membawa perdamaian masyarakat yang baik, yang bagus ya. Dan ini menjadi menjadi masa depan kita bersama. Dan Profesor Azmil jelas ya tadi mobility itu gagasannya sangat berdampak pada kehidupan beragama itu, bahkan sampai kepada ada nasional dan transnasional, sampai bagaimana gesekan-gesekan, ada friction dalam masyarakat Muslim. Nah ini adik-adik mungkin sangat penting sekali. Terima kasih adik-adik tadi sudah disampaikan bahwa ini kunci-kunci penting dalam diskusi mobilitas, dan itu satu konsep yang besar dan menurut saya sangat penting, dan kita bisa lihat selanjutnya dengan kunci-kunci yang sudah disampaikan oleh Profesor I dan kunci-kunci yang disampaikan oleh Profesor Azmil tadi, kita dapat terbuka ya. Mari kita gali selanjutnya lebih banyak. Dan karena ini waktu juga sudah, kita harus ke panel session dan ini keynote speeches, mungkin kita close saja. Dan pertanyaan-pertanyaan nanti boleh disampaikan ke saya. Nanti akan saya sampaikan kepada Profesor II dan Profesor Azmin. Demikian ya Profesor II dan Profesor Azmin ya. Terima kasih banyak nih. Thank you so much Profesor II, Profesor Azmin. Great inspiration, great keynote speeches ya. Dan sangat membantu kita dalam melihat bagaimana mobilitas ini ke depan sebagai bagian dari masa depan kita semuanya. Terima kasih. Thank you so much everyone. And we would like to invite Rektor UIN Mataram ya untuk memberikan plakat, dan silakan nanti sebelum itu saya akan menutup saja sesi ini. Kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Thank you so much, and kita beri aplaus yang meriah. Yeah. Kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya.
Oke, baik. Sementara yang selesaikan ini, Bapak, Ibu, teman-teman sekalian, please move to the parallel session. Kita mulai parallel session di sana jam 11 sampai waktu makan siang. Dan untuk parallel session siang ini jam 11 ada 5 sesi paralel panel dan ada 1 sesi book review buku tentang hukum Islam. Jadi silahkan sambil ambil snack sambil bergerak ke lokasi parallel session. I suppose I don't say it in English, that's enough in bahasa, right? Oke, monggo silakan. Kita mulai jam